Hey guys, today we're in the book of Exodus, chapter 33. So Moses has come down from being on the mountain with God for 40 days. In those 40 days, God has given him a whole set of laws, rules, regulations that we've read some about the tabernacle. We're going to read some next week, but then we will read the complete of it in the next book of your Bible, in the book of Leviticus. But during this time, Israel has abandoned God. They made their own cow, an Egyptian idol, and they started to worship that. Moses comes down. He breaks the Ten Commandments because they've broken their covenant with God. And now those who were doing that, not all, but the leaders of that, 3,000 were killed. And today we come to the point where God tells them, okay, it's time to leave Mount Sinai. You guys have been here long enough. You need to fulfill the promise that I made to Abraham. And so the Lord said to Moses, depart, go up from here, and go to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Go to the promised land. So he's saying, go to the promised land, what we're reading in the book of Joshua. And then he also says again, he said this before, but he's saying again, I will send an angel before you. I will send protection. And we see that multiple times throughout the story of them heading towards the promised land and them going into the promised land. But notice verse 3, he says, it is a land flowing with milk and with honey. Just means it's a great land to live in. It's good for their cattle. It's good for growing vegetables. But he says, but I will not go up among you. God says, go into the promised land, but I'm not going with you. He's saying you can receive the blessing, but I'm not going with you. And so he tells them because they are a stiff-necked people, because they are not a holy people, right? He truly knows the heart of Israel. And when they heard this, they mourned, which was the correct response. It's good that Israel mourned. And what happens, God tells them to strip themselves of their ornaments from Mount Oreb onward. The idea of this idea of stripping off their ornaments, it's an external decoration, decorating the flesh, caring about the outside instead of caring about the inside, right? They're externally ready, but they're not internally ready. So God's saying, as you leave Mount Sinai, you need to care more about the inside than the outside. In verse 7, we see Moses, he says he goes and he makes the tent of meeting. Now, this is not the tabernacle. This is a separate tent that would have been outside all of Israel. If you think of it like this, it's the best way I can paint it. If this is Mount Sinai, okay, this is Mount Sinai. God is up here at the top. Down here, all of Israel is camped, right? So they can see everything that's happening on Mount Sinai. Moses would have made the tent of meeting out here, away from the 2 million people. It's way outside of the camp. And this is the tent of meeting because this was Moses's private tent in a place where that he would meet with God. But notice this, he says, and everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting. This is a new thing, right? So they've been seeing God on a mountain, but now when they want to see God, when they want to worship God, they no longer just look at a mountain that's there, that's easy to see, but they would have had to put some action to their faith, right? It's not just, oh, God is everywhere, I can worship him, but they would have to walk through 2 million people to go outside of the camp to go to this tent where Moses is worshiping. This is kind of the idea of showing who truly wants to meet with God, right? Not everybody wanted to meet with God. Remember, all the people in Israel are not just Israelites. There were a lot of people from Egypt and a lot of other nations, but even Israelites themselves all of them did not want to meet with God. So it was faith the faith of wanting to meet with God, but putting to actions to go outside of the camp, right? And whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise up and each one would stand at the tent door and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. So as Moses is walking through the 2 million people, those who cared there would be almost like a parade idea, right? This idea of here comes Moses, and all the family would go outside of their tent and they would watch Moses walk all the way through these 2 million people, going opposite of Mount Sinai, going outside of Israel to the tent of meeting, and they would watch. It's an idea of respect, and they understand that Moses is their intermediary, right? That he's that person. And so those who cared would watch, and those who didn't, of course, would not. But when Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. So when Moses goes in this tent, the pillar of fire, the pillar of cloud, it would meet there, symbolizing God and Moses are meeting. Notice what it says: it would speak with Moses. This doesn't mean that Moses saw God face to face, okay? But somehow his presence, his glory was there. And we find out in the book of Numbers, chapter 12, Moses is describing this, and he tells us that, that he spoke to God with clarity and no riddles. So almost like literally Moses would speak and God would speak in kind of this conversation form. And so once again, he's not seeing God, he's not in heaven, but somehow God is communicating with Moses in real communication. And the people saw the pillar of the cloud standing at the entrance. They would rise up in worship. This was a special time, right? Once again, those who wanted to. And then we see our God Joshua, when Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent, right? Remember, Joshua, which is the book that we're reading on Sunday mornings, is his right-hand man, right? And so Joshua is learning worship from Moses. So when Moses was done and he would go back to the tent in which he's living in, right? Joshua would stay out at that tent, right? Because it was holy, it was amazing, it was sacred. It's something that Joshua wanted, and we will see that as we continue to read. Joshua said to the Lord, see that you to bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send me. Moses is kind of pressing God here and saying, well, if you're not going with me, then who's going to the promised land with us? And notice what he says. He says, I have found favor in your sight, your ways. Only you know in your sight and your people. Moses is connecting that the things on the earth, all of them belong to God. And so he's saying, hey, God, if you're not going with us, then I don't want to go. That's the whole point. And he said, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. What's interesting when you read it in the Hebrew is those two words, you, are a singular form. God is not saying, I will go with Israel. He's saying, Moses, I will go with you, and I will give you rest. Not Israel, but God is saying, I will be with you, Moses. And Moses said to him, if your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here. Moses is saying, God, if you're not going to go with all of us, then I don't want to go. I don't want to go where you're just with me. I want you to be with all of us, right? So if you're not going to the promised land, then don't make us leave. Let us live here at Sinai. Is it not in your going with us so that we are distinct, and your people from every other people on the face of the earth? Here, Moses understands, how is Israel different? How are they set apart? It's because God does that. God is the distinction. God, Yahweh, is the one that makes Israel completely different than any other nation on the planet. And the Lord said to Moses, this very thing that you have spoken, I will do. Here, God answers Moses' request. Moses said, "Go with us." And he said, "Fine, I'll go with you. I know your name." Moses said, "Please show me your glory." Remember, he's seen Mount Sinai. He's been there multiple times, up there with God in the fire and the smoke and the thunder and the lightning. He's meeting with God in the tent of meeting outside of the camp. And Moses is probably saying the same thing that we want to say is, "God, I want to see more of you. Show me more of your glory. Man, everything I know of you is amazing. I want more." And he says, "Show me your glory." And God said, "I will make all of my goodness pass before you and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord, Yahweh. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." Here he says, "I want to see more of your glory." And God says, "Well, I will show you my character." This idea of, he says, "I will proclaim before you my name." This idea of knowing somebody's name means that you will know their character. You will know their nature. You truly know who them are. So Moses says, "I want to see more glory," and God knows, well, you can't really see me because you will die. I'm holy, you're not. He says, "But I will make more of myself known to you." Okay. And then we see the verse 19, and this is a good verse. He says that I will be gracious and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. This is what we call a messianic prophecy. This is a piece of scripture that fulfills who Jesus is. Jesus is the person who gives grace and mercy. In Luke chapter 1, verse 27, okay, Zechariah is giving a prophecy of the Messiah that is to come, and he says he will be the one that shows mercy, okay? So this is a messianic prophecy here. And then he goes on and says, "Okay, I'll show who you are." Verse 22, "I will hide you in a cleft of a rock." Little note, this could be the same place where Elijah saw God in 1 Kings 19. We don't know that, but it could be. And then he says, "I will take away my hand and you shall see my back." Akor, Hebrew. Back does not mean the backside. It's not an anatomy word. There's several words for the back of a person. This is not one of them. This word akor means the afterwards. Could mean the back, but it really kind of means like the shadow or the after effect. So he's saying that I'm going to pass by, and you're not going to see the backside. And a lot of times people say that, right? You see the back of God. Can't even do that. He's too holy. He says, "I'm going to pass by. I'm going to be completely gone. And you're going to see the after effects. You're going to see the shadow of me. You're not even worthy of seeing me, but what you will see will be amazing." And so we can see here that the holiness of God, even in that Moses doesn't fully understand it. He wants to see it, but he doesn't understand that God is so holy that he can't even look upon him. He wants to know more, but he can't. Where's Jesus in this? Well, of course, that messianic prophecy that we talked about. I hope all of this makes sense, and we will continue to leave Sinai tomorrow in chapter 34. God bless.